All right, 6:05, the auspicious time has arrived and we can begin our interview. As all of you know, we've been conducting a bunch of interviews on Twitter Spaces since we're under lockdown. This is not a part of our COVID-19 and the Cities series, but every so often we do interview someone. We do interview someone who we feel would be able to give us some perspective on some of the issues that are going on in either in the country or with pertaining to their portfolios. That said, we thank you for joining our spaces. Minister Rajapaksa is already on, and we can begin now. Minister Rajapaksa, thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. We can tell from the response we've got that this is a eagerly anticipated interview, and I hope together we'll be able to do our audience justice. I'd like to start, Minister, with I know you have a bunch of portfolios under your management, but if we were to start with the sports ministry or that portfolio in particular, you were appointed sports minister in August 2020, and this appointment has sort of been generally well received given your personal involvement and experience with sports. But as you see it in Sri Lanka, what are the three sports that have the potential to grow and more than grow that can give a financial dividend, and what are some of the obstacles to this growth?
See, well, when you talk about sports, as I always say, we have 3 or 4 categories that we have identified. One is, of course, the commercial or the sports that we target medals like Olympic or Asian Games or Commonwealth Games, and on the other hand, we have leisure sports where we all do day to day, as part of our life, as part of our lifestyle. And at the same time, we do have sports that can generate a cash flow or sport economy that we call in our language. So sporting economy such as what we events like LPL or similar like what we did some time ago with Carlton 7 with rugby. And then we have the esports. So if you look at revenue wise, economical as point of view, I think esports will bring a lot of revenue to the country. And at the same time, we are looking at more opportunities or more events such as LPL in other sports like volleyball, and already we are almost about to finalize a similar tournament with futsal with international players, and also with volleyball. The delay was due to lockdown, but otherwise we would have started with by June or July, but now we are looking at doing it somewhere at the later part of the year. And so there are many other sports on in that nature like kabaddi, because we in Sri Lanka doesn't talk much big about kabaddi, but we have a lot of potential in kabaddi, and also it can bring a lot of foreign revenue to the country as a sportainment. So at the same time, looking at medal perspective, I don't want to mention cricket because of course cricket we have a good chance of winning World Cups and we have done that in the past. But if you look at Olympic and Asian Games level, we can definitely we have the capacity or the talent in archery, rifle shooting, even now in modern context with high jump and many other track and field events. So these are the areas that I think as a country we should concentrate in next couple of years when you look at Olympic level.
Right, but financially speaking, if which would you choose? Which three would you say were most viable for like cash economy?
Well, see, it's all about how we project ourselves in the platform, right? So if you look at esports, of course, it's a huge multi-million-dollar industry in the world, and esports will not only create sportainment, but also it will be a value addition for the startups as well. But at the same time, if you look at events like LPL or basketball or volleyball that we're trying to do with kabaddi and futsal, that will have another value addition from the tourist point of view and all tourism point of view, and also project Sri Lanka as a destination for events. So it's very difficult to say what takes or what, but I think it's end of the day how we project ourselves and what kind of decisions that we are going to take when it comes to the way forward on these projects.
Right. And when it comes to funding sports, it's very difficult to fund sports without some kind of corporate involvement, especially at the domestic level. So, like, how do you plan to surmount that challenge? Because there are so many sports, and I guess not enough money to invest in these things. How can you surmount that challenge?
See, it's mainly because of the culture, the sporting culture. There was a time where Sri Lankan domestic tournaments got more money than international tournaments. I'm talking about 20 years ago. I would say, if you look at cricket or even rugby, domestic level, we have more money coming into rugby than the international rugby circuit. Or even if you look at sports like football, football, domestic football gets more sponsorship than the national team. So it's all about how we are going to market ourselves to the corporate. So because end of the day, as you know, the corporates, there are sport loving corporates who will invest money because they love the sport, but at the same time, to have a sustainable program, we need to make it more commercial. We need the crowds to come in, and of course the main pillar would be the broadcasting rights. Make sure that we broadcast our tournaments, whether it's local or international, or whether it's domestic or international, to use the media much as we can. So in that way we can get more fans attracted, and also more sponsors attracted to the sport. So I think the biggest challenge is to find a way to show sports on live television. That is going to be the biggest challenge for us at this stage, giving the infrastructure.
Right. So, I mean, you were appointed sports minister August 2020, and you have pretty much been sports minister under COVID-19 lockdown. So, even with those challenges, I'm assuming you're fairly confident that you can pitch to corporates and get the kind of support you need for domestic level sporting events and stuff as well.
Yeah, of course, because see, it is definitely a challenge, and biggest challenge is going to be get the kids back on the ground. If I can get that going, then of course getting sponsors is not going to be a problem with a proper mechanism. If you look at now, what we have done is, we have used the neighboring countries and other countries to send athletes for high performance training. So in that way, they will get a better exposure, and more opportunities to take part in qualifying events. And at the same time, we are trying our best to get the national teams going. As you saw recently, the Sri Lankan football team did fairly well in South Korea. So the international level or the national level is quite okay at the moment, because it's much more easy for us to create a bubble and put them on training. But the biggest challenge is to get the school kids back on the ground, because the schools are not operating, the schools are closed, and because of the travel restrictions, they cannot go to grounds. The gyms are closed. So
Yeah.
the repercussion, the challenge is, how are we going to get these youngsters to come and train and get back to
Yeah.
the grounds. And that is something that we have to look at a different angle.
Exactly. I mean, I had some questions relating to that, to actually two questions relating to that.
Hmm.
One is, so the Sri Lankan rugby sevens captain had made a video pleading for rugby to start and for the team to be prepared for Asian Games. And of course, there were also people who were talking about maybe playing the game under like a specterless bubble, like some kind
Hmm.
of bubble. Is that a possibility for rugby? Is that
Yeah, I mean,
realistic
if
right
it's
now?
possible for cricket, if it's possible for football and kabaddi, I'm sure the rugby union can work out a similar structure. But I think the unions have to take over the responsibility of organizing domestic events, because ministry is there to regulate and support. So we are pretty much willing to support and help them, the union, to conduct their local tournaments. But the I think the unions must step up, because if kabaddi can do that, if volleyball can do that, if football can do that, and other even other sports, which is not being much highlighted, like archery or rifle shooting, and kabaddi especially. Kabaddi is also pretty much a physical sport. I'm sure the rugby union can step up and get things going.
Right. I hope our recording of this discussion will generate that kind of pressure after this conversation.
No, I think
Um,
I'm sure the union is also looking at different ways, but I think they have to think out of the box and put that together.
Exactly. I really hope that happens, because my follow up question was that many children who played impacts their entire lives, and this is something you will understand since you were part of the school sports system. But especially kids who are now in senior teams, who, ordinarily last year or this year they would have been captains or part of the senior team. Now they have lost their glory years, so to speak, because of the pandemic. And these kids will no longer get sports. I mean, their chances for sports scholarships, captaincies, all of that is lost because of the pandemic and being unable to get back to school. Is there anything that, I mean, as youth minister and sports minister, both, is there anything that you can pull together for these kids?
Well, see, we had a long conversation with the school section, the school sport department, and the sports ministry. How do we restart the school sports? So, in fact, we informed all the school section and also the most of the schools. We are willing to even, in fact, keep the infrastructure free to host the big matches and under a bubble system. So some of the schools came up and they did their part, but some of the schools they kept on postponing. So as a result, the third wave unexpectedly, third wave was there. Now we are on the third wave of COVID. So things have changed, but it is possible to play school sports even under a same under a bubble. But I do understand the cost is going to be a bit higher than the normal tournament or the normal games they play. But it is a very sad situation, but this is something we all have to face. So this is what we have been telling the education ministry, and we are working very closely with them, even looking at restructuring the examination system and also the educational system, because
Right.
that will not only this will be an ideal opportunity for Sri Lankan education system to restructure themselves.
Yeah, because actually, Minister, when I was doing some research in preparation for this interview, I know you are not Minister of Education, but youth, sports, and even, I mean, youth and sports are very clearly relating to or related to education.
Mhm.
And even digital technologies at this moment, given the pandemic and stuff, is also like connected to education. So I'm just wondering, like, how possible it is for you to work with the Ministry of Education. Because there are lots of issues with I mean, not just sports. For instance, I was talking to some educators. You had recently talked about providing fiber internet for schools, but like some of the educators felt that some of the children may not even have internet at home to access that sort of curriculum. So their idea is that the curriculum needs to be changed from, like, say, 8 subjects to 4 or 5 core subjects, so that kids don't have to sit such tough exams during the pandemic, because the field is not equal, so to speak. So is there something you can do in these areas, together with the education, the Ministry of Education, given that you are Minister of Youth and Sports?
Yeah, so let me start with sports. I mean, the Minister of Sports has to work with the Education Ministry because, according to the 13th Amendment, the sport is a devolved subject that goes to provincial councils. And at the same
Right.
time, if you look at the athletes from the age of 6 or 5 or 6 until they're 19, they work with the Education Ministry. So if the education ministry and the sports ministry does not work together, there is no way that we can put up a structure where we can create champions or create athletes who can win medals. So this is what we have been doing ever since myself and Professor Piris took over office. We have been working very closely to put up to work sport and education ministries together. So in that way, the national agenda to create champions can be taken down to the grassroots or to the school sector. So from the educational point of view, yes, we will be putting the high optical cable to 10,000 plus schools within next 6 to 8 months. But at the same time, I do understand, with the current system, it's not going to be easy to provide broadband for every corner of the country. But I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say we can provide to every corner of the country, but definitely we can make sure that we have the broadband expansion to most part of the country. So what we have done now, especially with Itaxela, we had a couple of meetings with the education ministry also to identify community centers or community hubs in these areas where we can provide them with high speed internet. And eTaxela net platform is free of charge. There is no data charge for that. So these kids can go into those centers and start and do their studies or education. And we are even looking at putting up around 10 or 20 computers to each of these centers, so they don't have to take a device from home. They can go there at their leisure time and start doing it. So we are doing a proposal for that now, and hopefully we will within the next week we will be submitting that proposal to the COVID committee, so we can inform the health authorities as well, and they get their blessings and they get approval. Because what we must understand is, whatever the decisions we take at this stage, we have to consult the health authorities, the health ministry, and then the COVID committee, and then take. So definitely we are working on a structure where we can get we can provide infrastructure for rural kids to get to have access to internet.
Right. So it seems like actually it seems like there are lots of plans in the working, and if these plans go according to plan, by the end of the year at least, there's a bunch of things that can be done, not just with e-Takshalava, but also with sports. So there'll be some progression, even if we still have not vaccinated, the larger amount of our population. Is that correct?
Yeah,
There'll be some
if you look
progress.
at the vaccination part, we have almost done more than 3 million people been vaccinated for the first dose, and about close to 1.5 million. I think subject to correction, around with the second dose out of that. So the vaccination program is going on. The slight delay we had was with the supplying of vaccines. As you know, it's a global pandemic, and it's not going to be easy for any of the countries to go and purchase vaccines. I mean, for example, you look at India. We all talk about this 600,000 AstraZeneca vaccines that Sri Lanka needs for the second dose. But at this stage, India provided us with around 1 million vaccinations some time ago, and we were supposed to get another 1 million. But unfortunately, with the current Indian situation, they are unable to export it. But if you look at from India's point of view, there is more than 124 million people in India waiting for the second dose of AstraZeneca. So this is something we need to understand. This is a global crisis, and this is not a local crisis. So we need to work as a team. The global leaders have to get together and work together to overcome this challenge. But from the Sri Lankan context, I mean, sports, yes, we do have a proper plan. We do have a very good structure. Mahela Jayawardena and the Sports Council is looking at high performance, and the State Ministry is looking at rural sports infrastructure development. The Youth Ministry, clearly we have put up our priorities. So, of course, we do know it's not a easy task to create employment for youth, and but that is one of our key priorities at this stage. Look for investment, create more entrepreneurs, create more employment, because as you know, the youth unemployment issue is going to be a biggest problem, one of the biggest problems that we are going to face in the in coming years post pandemic situation, with along with the mental distress. So this is something that we have already thought about and working on. But at the same time, we have, from the sporting point of view, we have contracted more than 60 high performance athletes, and out of that, 9 athletes are participating for the Olympics this time. And we have 60 high performance athletes, and we are looking at around, with team sports, more than 350 high performance athletes to be trained, to be contracted with the sports ministry in within next couple of months. So we have a plan. Maybe the time period might changes with the lockdown and or the travel restrictions and the COVID, but definitely we will be playing. We will be participating for international tournaments, and we are looking at hosting the Asian Youth Games in 2024 or 2026. And at the same time, we are looking at hosting international events. The LPL will be played this year, and along with that, we are looking at the futsal tournament, as I mentioned earlier. So things are moving, because what we believe, it's a tough time. We do understand economically it's tough, socially it's tough, politically it's unstable because of the pandemic. Because what I meant by politically unstable, it's very difficult for a government to reach out to people and communicate with the pandemic and the travel restrictions. So, but yet we are focused and we have a plan and we are working according to that.
Right. I mean, it's interesting that you talked about even about the mental side of things. Like you said, part of your plan was also looking at maybe some of the mental stresses that school children will be going through during this time. And I know
Yes.
that that's something that's maybe not talked about enough. So that'll be interesting to maybe discuss further later.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to ask you, Minister. I mean, you sort of touched on this, but I was listening to a webinar recently on education, and they talked about how during the pandemic, many kids might just decide not to come back to school after the pandemic. We're talking about 16-year-olds upwards. They may decide not to do their O levels, not to come and do their A levels, and they may just decide to either get a job or get married, or I mean, look for something more practical. But then, like you said, you were talking about unemployment. About unemployment, these kids would. We already have unemployment as an issue in our country, but these kids would, add to that unemployment issue. And this also ties to your. I think can tie to your Ministry of Entrepreneurship. Is there something that you can do or roll out any long-term plans in this regard to for to find jobs for these children?
Yeah, I mean, see, the biggest challenge, as I said, is going to be unemployment, also mental stress post pandemic. So this is what we are getting ready at the moment. We need to do a lot of research on this and a lot of planning as to how are we going to address uh, these situations, because as you know, the global economy is collapsing, the global trade is dropping, so the investments are going to be less, but yet we need to strengthen our local industries and move forward. So as a result, we, along with my ministry and other 6 state ministries and 9 provincial council chief ministers or the governors, along with chief secretaries, we have come up with a program to promote entrepreneurship with Samurdhi ministry, together with the Samurdhi ministry. So we are looking at aggressively promoting entrepreneurship among youngsters, especially in the rural economy. So when I say entrepreneurship, I'm talking about tech and non-tech, both industries. But
Hmm.
initially, we'll be concentrating on non-tech when it goes to rural areas. But yet, we are also looking at seriously considering about tech startups and tech entrepreneurship as well. So this is something that we will be launching in hopefully in another month's time or 2 months time. So in that way, we can create a entrepreneurship program where the youth can get engaged, and also this program is not only to create entrepreneurship but also to mentor them and guide them. So when I say mentoring and guiding, is all about getting them with the right partnership, getting them access to the right markets, all that together. So we have 6 state ministries along with my sports and youth ministry, and 9 chief secretaries from 9 provincial councils are working together on this project. So, on the other hand, with the IT ministry or the technology ministry, we are looking at establishing 5 tech parks. Uh,
Hmm.
Goal one, the contractor is already mobilized today, so hopefully within next 1 or 1.5 months, we'll be
Hmm.
able to start physical construction on the buildings. The goal that is the goal one, and Kurunagala Tech Park in another couple of months' time, and Kurunagala we will be more concentrating on medical technology. Along with that, we will go to Nuvarelia, Kandy, and Nuvarelia. Nuvarelia is mainly for tea industry, and fifth one, we are looking at either east or north. So Tech Park itself is going to create a lot of excitement and a lot of traction. But I must agree, and I must say, just because we build buildings, we will not be able to provide employment unless we have a proper scheme and policy. So
Hmm.
policy framework is what we are concentrating at the moment, and by August we will put out the policy framework for tech industries to be established. Tech industries that are going to invest in that, the policies and the criteria, or the support that the government can give to them during this time, for their investments. So by August we will be able to announce that, and we don't have to wait till the buildings are ready. The investors, the companies can come in and have the uh, same benefits that they will get in the tech park to be start their industries anywhere in the country they need.
Right. Do you foresee any challenges, Minister, in the sense like, for instance, if the buildings come up and if the tech park comes up really fast, will you have to implement like a training program for the youth beforehand or anything like that? Is there something that you're working on in the interim?
Yeah, I mean that has to happen simultaneously because the mistakes we have done, different governments. We always look at the physical infrastructure, but we have never concentrated on human capital development. So this is what we are putting more time on. We need to educate and create the environment that these kids will be trained for this employment now itself. So eventually, once the infrastructure is ready, we will have the human resources also in place. Same goes to the port city, because there is no point we create 800,000 or 80,000 employment, direct employment in the port city. But if we don't train our youth with the proper and right education, that they can be employed at the port city. So this is what we have already started, and this is our utmost priority. And if you look at my budget at the sports ministry, we have clearly given 20% for human capital development. So this is the guideline or the advice I got from the sports council as well. So my next year budget, we will definitely allocate around 35% of my total budget for human capital development. So eventually my target is to make it 50% by 2024.
Right. So I can tell that you're fairly confident that there are at least a couple of big projects lined up that will give that the youth can go to for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, Minister, I wanted to ask you. I was looking at some of the institutions that come under the Ministry of Technology, and Sri Lanka Computer Emergency Readiness Team (CERT), as we call it, is also one of these. And I think most people, especially people on this Twitter Spaces, know about CERT. I mean, what we know about CERT is that when there are cases in which there's some kind of trouble on the internet, especially social media, people turn to CERT, especially when you're being like blackmailed or threatened. And this is like especially true of young children, girls especially, who are either exploited or blackmailed for sex, or their pictures that they shared with an intimate partner end up on porn sites. But despite this, like activists and lots of people know that when they go to CERT has not been very well equipped to do much or to deal with this. Is there something that you can do to enhance like CERT's capabilities to be more effective and efficient here?
Yeah, I think again that comes to regulations and new laws to be introduced. So we are looking at the privacy bill and also data protection act, and at the same time prevention of online falsehood and manipulation bill, like what they have done in Singapore and even in India. This kind of regulational change must happen immediately. So we have given a priority for that, and Justice Ministry Minister Honorable Ali Sabri is working on them. So the privacy bill and the prevention of online falsehood and manipulation bill, and those kind of regulations will be brought in fast, uh, in order to protect uh, the privacy and the social media users. So we must say, there is a lot of criticism when it comes to regulating social media or providing proper framework, because one would interpret it that as that in a way that the government is trying to control social media. So I must clearly say that we have no intention of controlling any sort of media, but we have to regulate and make sure that the privacy of each and every individual is protected, and the data that is on these platforms are being protected. And then the fake news does not take the center stage of the country's main national media, because what we see today, fake news that that circulates on social media ends up become a national issue. So that has to stop. So that has to stop, and then that can only stop by educating the social media users, but also bring regulations to protect the social media users. So all these laws that we are drafting is to protect the people who are using social media wisely. So those kind of without those kind of regulational backing, SET cannot do much at this stage.
Yeah, right. And also, I mean, I'm sure you're aware there's a huge pushback against some of these laws that the government is planning on bringing in. will there be a consultative process or something like that that will bring the activists also on board?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we always believe in crowdsourcing, so we want to hear, listen to them. We want to get their ideas, because see, sometimes it's the same person who criticizes someone without proper evidence is the same person who gives ideas to us as well, when it comes to regulation. So it happened vice versa. So I think we all must get together and get engaged with this process and be part of it, because end of the day, whether you are a critic or whether you use social media as a semi platform, or whether you use it as an educational platform, or whether you use to criticize someone, or to criticize or to criticize individual, or to attack their reputation, end of the day, it is our own community that who are involved in this all these incidents. It's not someone from outside.
Mm. And I mean, I know the data protection law is something that is, very, how do I put it? There's not much that has gone into data protection law because maybe it's a new kind of new set of legislations and whatever. But if I were, besides data protection law, if you had to if you had to highlight three laws that you feel that cover your portfolios, but that need urgent attention. What would you like? What would you highlight and say these are the most important that need to be either amended or changed or something like that?
See, I think I will take from the starting of the sports ministry. I think the sports law has to
Mm-hmm.
change, which was introduced in 1970s, even way before the open economy. So the current sports law does not allow the commercial aspect of sports or the sporting economy to take place, and also modern training and other facilities. So this is something that I'm looking at, and Mr. Sangakkar, Kumar Sangakkar, is heading that subcommittee along with Rowena and few other colleagues from the Sports Council and other sectors. So Sport Act, I would say, is something that we will be concentrating on, and at the same time, of course, Data Protection Act and Fake News Act, and then the regulations that they say that we are going to the policies that we are going to build or to come up with for the SMEs and tech startups.
Right. So those are your top three picks to change in terms of legislation.
Yeah, because introducing the new digital national ID or unique national ID with biometrics. So
Hmm.
collection will be going into data collection within next couple of months, along with another 5 or 6 ministries together with Gram Sevaka, Samurdhi, and other departments. So once data is collected, then we are looking at establishing a national data protection center. So in that way, the entire national data will be under one platform. So along with that, we are looking at
Hmm.
working with other line ministries and departments for digitalization campaign. So in that, the priority
Right.
is the national ID with the unique national ID, digital ID with the biometrics. So to do all these, we need to have the data protection and the privacy bill passed in Parliament.
Right. And some of these, I mean, some of these institutions you're talking about come under the Ministry of Technology already. So it would be easier to get the database together.
Yeah, but see, the challenge is not working as an individual, but working in clusters or in groups, because because once I got into the sports ministry, the what I realized, the sports ministry on its own cannot survive unless we work closely with the education ministry
Hmm.
and other relevant subject ministers has to support the youth, because youth ministry alone cannot youth ministry on its own cannot achieve the targets that they have there that has been given in the manifesto. So likewise, the digital or the technology ministry on its own cannot achieve these targets or achieve these projects, because it's all interconnected. So we need Grama Sevakas, we need Samurdhi Nidadari, we need Kushkar Nidadari, we need GAs and AGAs. So this is something that we all have to work together.
Right. Thank you, Minister, for that. I just want to switch back very briefly to sports. This is a question that
Hmm.
I was quite curious about. In some countries, like Australia, for instance, women's teams and men's teams sort of share the same base contract remuneration. In countries like Pakistan, I was reading that women cricketers are entitled to a year-long paid maternity leave in addition to the option of switching to a non-playing role as they approach like an advanced stage of pregnancy. Is this something that is feasible for Sri Lankan sportswomen? I mean, not just in cricket, but in sports for sort of equity of pay and stuff like that.
Yeah, because see, if you look at the history, the women have done much better than men when it comes to international sporting arena. I mean, if you start from Susantika Jayasinghe to all the athletes, and most of our netball team has done much better than our rugby sevens team. So, in that way, I would say that the women participation and women in sport has made us so proud than men. I'm not being biased on anyone, but this is the reality. But yeah, of
Right.
course, I mean the cricket committee is also looking at headed by Aravind De Silva. Once they finalize the men's team contracts, then they will look at the women's team and how to restructure it as well. Because women's cricket is something that we are going to invest heavily on for next couple of years. Simply because we believe one day eventually women's cricket will come into Olympics as well, hopefully, and that is some area, that is an area that we can actually do well. And when it comes to other sports like track and field or even shooting or archery, our girls are much stronger. We just need to give them the opportunity. So if you look at the high performance contract, we haven't done any sort of discrimination on gender. So men and women all get equal pay based on their performance.
Right, that's great to hear. Okay, just quickly touching in on young people and politics. South Asia is notorious for having aging leaders, and this is something that has been highlighted in Sri Lanka as well. You're one of the younger ministers right now in Parliament, but what do you think needs to be done to encourage more young people to get into politics and into advocacy, political advocacy, and stuff like that?
Well, it's a very tough question, I would say, because the current context does not allow youngsters to be in politics. Simply because of the current context of current social media and the media exposure. If you look at my father's era, when he was 23, 24 years old in 1970, the social media wasn't there. He didn't have Facebook. He didn't have media. It was different environment, and their politics has always based on policy and not based on sentimental driven or emotional driven. But when I went to Parliament in 2010, when I was 23 years old, things have changed. It's a totally different thing. So this is where I think the youngsters have to step up and come up, come into politics with new vision and policy. Because in Asia we always believe in dynastical politics, but my personal opinion, dynastical politics does not exist anymore. You can be bought into politics because of your family, but if you want to survive in politics, you need to show who you are and you need to be with your voters and with your people. So I believe the youngsters, the educated young generation must come into politics. But at the same time, the society is much more vicious than my father entered politics 51 years ago. So that also we must keep in mind, because if you go to social media, if you use national media, it's always about negative sentiments that been shared, about negative posts that has been shared. I mean, for me, okay, I've been in politics for 11 or 12 years now, so I'm quite used to it. But just imagine a young entrepreneur or academic going abroad for their education and coming back into Sri Lankan politics, and all of a sudden being accused for something that he never did, or he never even thought of doing. I mean, take Professor Pires for example. I mean, see, he been accused for things, uh, been compared sometimes with different kind of people. So whether you are a Rhodes Scholar or whether you haven't gone to school at all, does not matter. When you enter Parliament, you look at all the 225 people, has the same perception. So this has to change. I mean, this has to change. But I would say the politicians also have a bigger role to play in that, because we criticize each other. So we point the finger at other politicians and say you are a Horagankara, Mini Marua. But then what we don't realize is we are pointing the finger back at us itself, right? So this has to change. I mean, if this does not change with the current set of politicians, it's going to be very tough to get more young, educated people into the system.
Right. I mean, and this is something that I think women politicians have raised about how difficult it is for them to get into politics. And I may as well say it at the outset here that this is not me saying that I have political aspirations. I'm speaking on
Mhm.
behalf of women politics who have said, women politicians who have said that they've highlighted this as one of the bigger barriers to getting into politics. The
Yeah,
fact
yeah.
that, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that because if we start from President Prime Minister Sirima Bandaranaike, and then President Chandrika Bandaranaike, we have women who has done really well in politics, but at the same time, as I said, the modern context and this electoral system has made it more difficult for young or women or females to get into politics. So this has to change.
Right, and this is particularly because social media and the nature of media today allows a lot more criticism to come at people, and that's an interesting perspective.
It's
Um,
not only not about criticism. I mean, constructive criticism is good. But when you've been accused or when you've been assumed for no reason, those kind of things have kept a lot of youngsters getting into politics. Because I've spoken to a lot of young educated people, inviting them to come and join with us. They have always mentioned, they don't want this kind of lifestyle, because they are more into academic or entrepreneurship mindset. So this is what I think we need to change in the future. Constructive criticism or questioning is something that must happen and it has to increase. I think the people has to question the administrators in every step. I mean, when I say administration, it's not only the politicians but secretaries, officials, GAs, government officers, all of us,
hmm.
all of them, because they are the part of it. They are part of this entire system.
Right, and it's interesting that you say that despite maybe getting into politics because of family or whatever, ultimately you have to each person has to fight that battle out themselves when it comes to the polls. But I mean, one other thing that comes to mind is a lot of people, especially young people in politics, are fighting about this campaign financing cap. Minister, do you think that's something that Parliament will bring forward? And if so, who do you think brings it forward generally, if that's going to be a change?
Yeah, I think a cap has to be put for financing in campaigns because you see sometimes the campaigns have become so expensive and it's not practical at all. So I think these are the things that the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is looking at doing with the new constitution. So
Right,
already committee has been appointed to draft the new constitution. So they are looking at all these angles.
right. So it'll come from the president, but not from a separate ministry or anything like that.
So I think it has to come with a new constitutional amendment because you cannot have new laws with the old system. So you need to the entire system, the electoral system to the constitution. If some sort of
From
change can happen,
right,
then
right,
it's
from from there. Right, okay. Um, right. I have just a few questions more. One is as Minister of Entrepreneurship. One of the biggest issues we're facing, or a lot of women are facing, especially, is this issue of microfinance.
good.
Is there any intervention that can be done? I know entrepreneurship is more about maybe enhancing their abilities to do business on their own, but there are these loan sharks and lots of issues relate. There is there anything that can be done?
Yeah, I mean, see, this is the biggest problem the entrepreneurs are facing is access to finance. Because, to be honest, when you go to the bank to get a loan, they ask for your business proposal. Then you give a proposal, then they ask for details, then you give all that. Then at the last, when you go and at the end, they're like, can I have your deed or your house deed or some collateral? And that's not fair, because either you tell them on the first day itself, we don't want anything being collateral and come, or you just, don't consider the collateral and consider the business and then give the loan. So this is something that we have been always arguing or putting in front of the central bank. So now what we have done is, as a result, when you can't go and take a loan from a normal banking system or the traditional banking system, you always it's natural for you to go and find different ways because you need financing to run your entrepreneurship or to run your business. So no matter how hard we try to educate people, they will not listen because they don't have option. I'll tell you for example, there was this company in Kurunagala. So it's under investigation now. So they have collected more than 12 billion rupees only from Kurunagal district, and now that company is not there anymore. But for 3 years ago, the central bank has blacklisted them, announced and published not to invest with them. But yet people in Kurunagal kept on investing because there is no other way for them to get access to finance. So this is what we are working with the central bank, other banks. We have put a proposal from the youth and sports ministry to create an youth seed fund. So from that fund, we'll be able to invest or give loans or to invest on SMEs, tech and non-tech, based on their proposal, based on their business proposal and the feasibility of the business. And also we are looking at establishing other funds with the private sector where we can fund SME sector. And also commodity financing is also something that we are looking at, because Sri Lanka does not allow commodity financing. So as a result, people have to go and lend from the black market, or this polymudral we call it, to go and buy commodities. So these are the areas that we will be working on in the future.
Right. Minister, just two quick questions. One is, there's a lot of talk about cryptocurrency. Given that I think El Salvador has adopted it as their legal tender, there are questions about wanting to know if Sri Lanka would do the same. Do you have an answer to that? Would you have
Yeah,
a
no, we are seriously looking at crypto, and also we are looking at other exchanges as well, like commodity exchange and the food exchange with the Port City Act. So crypto is definitely an agenda, and we are looking at very seriously.
Okay, so that I hope will answer some of our audience's questions. And also, there were questions about PayPal and wanting to know what obstacles lie in the way of that.
Yeah, we are already in touch with PayPal India and PayPal Singapore. Even mission in Singapore is in directly in touch with them. So uh, we are talking to them on a regular basis to make sure that we open it up for Sri Lankans. So I hopefully that might happen soon.
Okay, great. Minister, I have to tell you, I mean, I had expected there would be many people wanting to speak to you when we advertise this Twitter Spaces,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't personally expect the volume of messages and DMs, and actually even personal calls and messages that I got from people who either wanted me to ask you a certain question or wanted to know if there was a possibility for me to ask their questions on behalf of
Mm-hmm.
them. So I know I told your team that I would open this up for questions at the end of the session, but I have decided not to. I hope you don't mind, because a lot of the questions are repetitious, and there's a huge volume of them. And if we open it up, it's going to be a lot of maybe similar questions, and you have only promised us an hour. Um, so for that reason, I hope you don't mind. What I have done is I incorporated some of the questions that people asked into questions that I had already prepared for you. So
Mm-hmm.
just in summary, I hope Akib, who wanted to know long-term plans for the development of cricket, better payment. I hope Vishwa Alutge, who wanted to know about playing under a spectreless bubble. Malit Yapa, who wanted to know about giving children access to computers, Jayani Athauda, who wanted to know about the challenges to education. I think we had Vishwalutke again wanting to know about data protection and cybercrime, law infrastructure, as well
Mm-hmm.
as Ted on Twitter and Kesara Ratnavibhushana. I hope all your questions, which were relating to the topic, were answered. Um, yeah, I hope your questions were answered. And as always, at the end of an interview, I encourage everyone to tweet at the minister for any questions you may have that we were unable to answer. He or his team will be happy to respond to them.
Yeah,
Thank you
please
very
feel free.
much. Yeah, thank you very much, Minister, for getting on board and answering my questions. And thank you to everybody who tuned in.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye.
Thanks. Bye.